Hello, everyone. Looks like we are live. And before we start, I just would like to ask you to give me a sign in the chat. How is the sound? How is the video? My guest for the second time today, and I'm very, very honored and very happy to connect with Tom LUONGO because we connected for the first time 3 months ago. As I looked at the date, it was a very different reality then, Tom, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I'm very happy to see you again. Tell us, before we start with the live stream, the best way to find you and support your work. Where is it?
Sure. You can follow me on X at TFL1728, and I'll put that in the chat. Why not? Because it's not a bad idea to do that. Hold on for a second. I just did something dumb.
Sure.
Let's see. Where are we? Chat. There we are. Boom. Comments. TFL1728. That is my X handle, and we'll do that. And so you can follow me there. And as well as on Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, and of course my website at tomluongo.me or goldgoatsandguns.com.
So not much has changed except no goats, but gold and guns still, right? As you told me last time.
Yeah, no, we did get rid of the goats after 12 years of raising goats here in North Florida on probably the worst plot of land to raise goats on in North Florida. So eventually we just threw in the towel, but I always say I do miss the little buggers. I really do. I still have my dogs. I still have the ducks. I still have my cat, but not having, it's both quiet and in a good way and a little kind of sad in another way, because it's not a place to go out and then have all these adoring girls come out and look at you and go, "You're going to feed me. You're going to pet me. You're going to take care of me." Because they were all bottle babies, right? So we raised dairy goats for the last few years, and when you raise dairy goats, when you raise any dairy animal, to be honest with you, you have to develop a really strong bond with them, and in order to have them look at you as their parent and whatnot, as opposed to their mom. Because if you don't, then they don't milk then they're very recalcitrant when trying to milk them on the stand and everything else. It's just part of the whole process. And so you had this like really, really strong relationship with them. And on top of everything else, they were just hilarious to have around because they're such characters. So I do miss them.
Thank you, Tom. And yeah, it's the intelligence of animals and nature. Everything is connected, right? So much to talk about today. I told you before we started, it's a little overwhelming. So you have to be really deciding where your attention goes nowadays. So I will go to the latest, because just before we connected today, this is from, I think, about an hour ago or so, from Truth Social, President Trump. I just spoke with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico. It was a very friendly conversation and she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States. These soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into our country. We further agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period, during which we will have negotiations headed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and high-level representatives of Mexico. I look forward to participating in those negotiations with President Sheinbaum as we attempt to achieve a deal between our two countries. So, Tom, I want to first, let me tell you, I had a question ready for you regarding tariffs, and then this happened, but I still want to go to my question, because 25% on Mexico, right, and Canada, 10% on China from February 1st. I want to ask you about the bigger picture regarding those tariffs. Is this good overall for the US citizens? Is it really about illegal migrants and drugs and cartels, or is it about reshaping the United States supply chain, and how this will affect those tariffs the price of gold, which I think just went 28.30 as I looked on the price, 2,830 per ounce, and silver and crypto market as well. I know it's a loaded question, but I know you can take it from here.
I will do so once I also get the gold price up, because it's like the I'd like to, but okay, never mind. Yes, so let's start with the beginning. This is Trump believes in the ZOPA strategy of negotiations. ZOPA stands for Zone of Probable Agreement, right? ZOPA, ZOPA. And it's an old strategy that was designed, or that was first articulated back in the 70s, and it's been updated since then. But Trump is like the ZOPA master. His goal original is, as always, is far greater than any particular policy that he puts forth looks like on the surface. So in order to remake the United States, in order to organize it as a country that works for itself, as opposed to subsidizing the rest of the world, you first have to change the dynamic of the relationships economically between the United States and the rest of the world. And so what the world doesn't realize, and what so many of us don't realize, because we've been, including myself, the level and the extent to which other countries tariff the United States exports. Okay. Now, in order for the United States to be the global reserve currency, we have to run a trade deficit with the rest of the world. Goods come in, money goes out, and that's how we fund the expansion of the U.S. Treasury market and. So it's called Triffin's dilemma or Triffin's paradox. I have been, continue to be, and absolutely now believe even more so that the United States, at a very high level, is done with being the global reserve currency. Okay. FOMC Chair Jerome Powell made this abundantly clear, if you were listening, 3 years ago. Senate banking testimony, I've covered this before. Senate banking testimony, Humphrey Hawkins, his quarterly meeting with the Senate Banking Committee, said, look, I think there's room in the world for more than one reserve currency. This came from the FOMC chair, and nobody listened to it. I listened, because I listen. So the tariffs are a means to an end, and the means to an end is to control the border of the United States, because Trump firmly believes, as well do I, regardless of my personal political affiliations or proclivities, that if you don't have a border, you don't have a country, right? We don't have borders between, we have administrative borders between Florida and Georgia and North Carolina, within the states. But the United States as a country either has borders and is a country or isn't. Now, our globalist masters at Davos, City of London, and other places don't believe in national borders. They believe in breaking all those down in order to create global governance, where the border that they control is all of us. Trump is not on board with this. So in order to deal with our problem of not having a border, we have two natural borders on the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean, and the West Coast, the Pacific Ocean, but we have a northern border with Canada, and we have a southern border with Mexico, and both of those countries are run by Davosian, I'm trying to keep it clean, knob lickers. And let's just make it very, very clear what we're dealing with here. So when you understand that, then you understand why they got a 25% tariff and only got a 10% tariff. Remember, we already have a 10% tariff on China. So we're going to raise the tariffs by another 10%. From what I understand about the behind the scenes about the transition team at this point, they're not happy about that. They want more. But let's start with where we are. What did that do? Knowing full well that Mexico's exports into the U.S. and Canada's exports into the U.S. are a far greater percentage of their GDP than our GDP, this tariff fight was over before it began. Which is why Scheinbaum folded immediately. Because what Trump wants is the stop of the flow of people into the country, period. He wants it at the northern border with Canada, and he wants it at the southern border with Mexico. And indirectly, this is another way of saying, China, get out of North America. Because the Chinese are the ones making the fentanyl, along with the CIA and everybody else, bring it in and across through the Darien Gap and then in through Mexico and into the country. Right? We have the same problem on the northern border with Canada. That needs to end. So, bing, drop a 25% tariff on them and say, look, we'll suspend the tariff if you help us on the border. She virtue signaled for about 2 or 3 days that she wasn't going to do this. The Canadians still haven't gotten the message yet because they're much more deeply embedded in the whole globalist project than Mexico is. So Mexico was the easy fix because it just, the rot just isn't that deep. He also declared that the cartels, the Mexican cartels, are foreign terrorist organizations. Therefore, he's unleashed the full weight and power of the U.S. military to deal with them. And the cartels, and nobody comes to power in Mexico without getting some level of support from the cartels. So clearly, you put Scheinbaum in a box and say, you either work for us or you work for the cartels, but we're going to wipe out the cartels, and you can either join us or you can be against us. It's not that tough. And it's over. So for right now,
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you a quick question? Because when I was scrolling through this latest news, and she was addressing that, right? That the tariffs will be paused for a month now. Someone left a comment under one of those videos that she is cartel queen. I don't know much about that president of Mexico. Does she has connections with cartel? Is she owned by cartels? I mean, I know it's a maybe strange question, but
my point, the point being is that it really doesn't matter ultimately. Ultimately, she was put in power by continental Europe. That's very clear. And then every other layer on top of that isn't that important, because ultimately, well, it is important, but it's, what I mean by this is that we know that this entire trade of the human trafficking, the fentanyl, the border invasion, and everything else was all been funded by USAID, by the CIA, by MI6, by. So they're all part of this thing, and he's attacking all of them root and branch at the same time. Okay, so that's the most consequential part of this. Like I've always been of the opinion, just to make sure that I understand what's going on here and I don't lose the audience. I've always felt that the situation between the United States and China is easily solvable. It's not a big. It is and it isn't an easy. It's both an easy fix and a complicated fix at the same time. If there's a general agreement, because look, under Obama and under the rest of them, and under Biden and the old U.S. oligarchic system, the imperial system, the Euro-aligned, Eurocentric system, Davos, for lack of a better term, the United States and China are enemies. And so the aggressive nature of our foreign policy and of our intelligence projection overseas aimed at China was far worse under that regime than under Trump. Trump just wants America. Basically, if you look at what Trump is saying, he's like, look, the Western Hemisphere is ours. Y'all do what you want. And that's why there's a negotiation between Xi and Trump is really easy, ultimately, because China's doing a lot of the things they're doing because they believe that they're under threat. We believe Trump understands who the real enemy is, and it's not China, and it's not Russia, and it's not Poland or any of the Eastern European states, and it's Europe. And it's very clear that it's Europe. I never thought I would. My biggest fear coming into the second Trump administration was that he didn't understand this. The last time you and I spoke, I think that should have been clear. Today, I'm literally in shock over the last 6 weeks or so, watching him go directly after City of London and the European Union. Now, when you stop to break down, it made perfect sense. It would make perfect sense for that to be the case if Trump has what we understands what we understand about where all the Trump, the Russiagate stuff and all that stuff came from. It all came from MI6 and Clinton and Europe and all of our policy under Obama and under Biden and all the foot dragging that was going on during the first Trump administration, clearly serving the interests of the globalists in Davos and Europe, clearly at the expense of the United States. And I've always argued that the goal here was to destroy the United States, pull the capital out, repatriate it back to Europe, and just bring the United States, collapse the United States, cut a deal with Russia and China, and then try from there to utilize that pile of capital and that control over the flow of money to then break up BRICS and break up Russia and break up China. And it was always, and Ukraine was the fulcrum in Eastern Europe to bankrupt the Russians, and Israel, Iran, in many ways is a means by which to stop Asian integration. And it all goes right back to old British foreign policy, going back to the 18th and 19th centuries, about trying to keep Germany from hooking up with Russia, from keeping Russia bound down as a land-based empire, and to break up and keep Central Asia broken and scattered and fighting amongst themselves. Same thing with Eastern Europe. So understand that if Trump has that map of the world in his head, which it looks like he has, then all of these things that we're seeing him do have one solve: break the European Union, force the crown to submit to American interests, and we solve our conflicts with Russia and China and Iran and the rest in no time flat. And I think that's what's going on. And we can get into why the gold is being repatriated, why he's planning on putting tariffs on the European Union, why he's said flat out he won't negotiate with the European Union because they're not a real country. He will negotiate with the individual member states, which are sovereign, and that's why he sent Elon Musk in to go and try and support AfD in Germany in the upcoming elections there. It's why he sent Elon Musk out against Keir Starmer. It's all clearly designed around a central policy. And that's why he wants Greenland. Because he's going to because part of the negotiation with Russia over Ukraine is going to be to pull all the missiles and all of that stuff out of Poland, out of Germany, move it to Greenland and go, look, we're done. We're out of here. And you can negotiate with Europe, and the Europeans can try and subjugate Russia all they want. That's up to them. Now, clearly they're not in a position to do that. So, and then we have where does Candace Owens, for example, come out with a documentary about Macron's wife, right? Where does all of that fit in? Like, it's all staring you in the face. Like it's right there. And let's just, at this moment in time, we're also like in a state of shock that really, I'm just literally like, I can't even believe this is happening, right? I mean, let me put it this way. If he had done what he's done so far in the first 2 weeks over 4 years, 20% of that, I would have been happy. I don't know what to do with this today. Like, I don't know what to do, because this is far more than I ever expected him to be able to get done in even 4 years. And he's just gone in with a plan, and he's knocking everybody down, and he's proving to everyone just how brittle their empire is, their power structure, how brittle and how big a house of cards it truly is.
I want to say this, Tom. First of all, thank you for saying what you just said. And I want to say, this is a confession from me now. It's unusual, maybe. I am really relieved to have someone like yourself on my channel and to be able to have conversation like this, because my take on the current political events comes from a different perspective. I am not an expert in geopolitics. I am an intuitive person, and I am a little bit different dimension way of approaching things, trying to connect the dots. And I know a lot of people struggle with, I don't want to offend anyone, but I think they struggle with trusting Trump. I try to be polite now. Struggling with trusting Trump and struggling with unfoldment of events, and still feeling that he is one of them, whoever them, which, can I just say before I ask you my next question?
Sure.
You mentioned Europe, that this is about Europe. You know, I think this is about a group of people or creatures or beings that are that don't have any sense of belonging. They might be residing in Europe, Switzerland, England, wherever it is, but they don't really have a sense of nationality as far as they represent the nation and tradition and culture. That's how I see it. And I think what's going on right now, you are so spot on this, because Candace Owen and her programs about Kamala and the birth certificates and the entire process, I mean, this is all, it all is strategic. And a lot of people think it's random, that now it's about pedophiles. It's not suddenly about pedophiles, and it's all about that too. It's it's all connected. It really is the organ harvesting, is the human trafficking, and is the money that is made on it. And when you look at this, and again, I'm not an expert, so let's just look into this. USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, is independent agency of the US government for administrating civilian foreign aid and development assistance. So I was thinking, oh my goodness, this means human trafficking. For me, that's how I read it. This means there is a conflict. They create the conflict. They want to go. They want to help. And then we got the children. We got the people. We organ harvest. And we do other experiments. Look, DARPA. Okay? People don't know it. I'm so sorry. Just do the research. I get like really passionate about it because it really makes sense. You just have to connect the dots. So someone left a comment about this on my channel. I didn't know this, Tom. A 1993 USAID document shows the agency signed an agreement with the Soros Foundation Management Training Program to train 30 professionals from Bulgaria, Estonia, Poland, of course, Romania, and Slovakia. We are all victims of this stuff. Let me acknowledge you, Deb Dietz. I think that's your name. So, Tom, sorry, because I really get like passionate about this because this really makes sense. So when now Trump is talking about it, and Musk was just said that they are criminals, and what did he say? They have to be like done with them. Isn't it the case? Is because of that with this USAID?
That's the USAID. You're talking about USAID, right? USAID. Yeah. USAID is. Yeah. I mean, Mike Benz has done unbelievable work, explaining into everyone just how deep this rabbit hole goes. And I was just chatting with my partner Dexter White about this in our morning meeting this morning, and I left him with this idea on because we were incredibly happy with what we're seeing so far, and it's on this front, which is that Mike. I think, remember, Mike was a speechwriter for the Trump administration the first time through. He's deeply embedded and involved in all of this. I think he was advanced recon. I think he was sent out about a year ago, coordinated with Tucker Carlson and other people in order to start getting this information out there and start the process of explaining to everybody just how deep the NGO rabbit hole goes. Okay. And I don't think you can really read it any other way. And when I said that, Dexter was, I think you're right. I'm like, yeah, I think that's very clear where we are on this. And Mike's continuing to do great work pretty much every day. He's a warrior in this fight. And I think that is, I mean, I don't want to discount, anything you just said because you said a lot. But I do do agree with you. It's all connected to these people. And, you know, when I look at the way Trump started this process, we're going to take Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal, and we're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, and all of this stuff. This is Trump's way of telling you where we're headed. Okay. It's not we're expanding the empire. It's that Canada is occupied territory. Mexico is occupied territory. They need to be liberated. Europe is occupied territory. England is occupied territory. Ireland is occupied territory. And these people all need to be liberated in some way, manner, shape, and form. They can choose to be liberated on Trump's terms. And in effect, what Trump is saying is like, look, liberate yourselves and I will help you. Okay? But I have to blow open the doors of the status quo. And the best way to do that is to hurt them where they live, which is in their ability to change and control the flow of money. Okay? That's what's important here. This is why it's not just geopolitics. You have to tie this to capital markets because geopolitics and the control and flow of commodities is downstream of the ability to manipulate the price of goods and services based on how the central banks create and manipulate the value of the currencies themselves. This is where I didn't start out this way. I started out as a gold guy 12 years ago when I first went to work for Newsmax. And then over time, it became obvious that we live in hyper-politicized markets. And over the course of time, it became obvious to me that if you if you understand money and the flow of money, and now you have to really start digging into the plumbing of the money, of how the money works and how the shadow banking system operates outside of the central banks and how this is done and how that's done. And then you realize, oh, all of that Triffin's dilemma stuff that we talk about in macro terms, that's the grease that funds all of this because the money goes out, goes in an unaccountable way, gets levered up at incredibly cheap interest rates so that we create orders of magnitude more dollars actually flowing around the world than there are. And then they use that to buy elections, create flash mobs, do this, do that, steal elections, undermine the national, and then send all that money back on us to destroy us from within, and then blame us for running an empire. All the while saying, "Oh, we're not really powerful. We're a bunch of incompetent European." European communists. Like, no, you're not. And the same thing with the Brits. Like, but we know that 89% of Canada's crown land. We know that they still own Australia. They still own this. They still own it. It's all part of the same thing. And so when you dig deeply into how these things start to work, and when you start to look at the world with that idea in your head, then you start to see how the markets trade, and you start doing cross-market analysis about how the euro trades versus the dollar versus the yen, how the bond yields are manipulated, how bond spreads are manipulated, and all of that stuff. That's where I wound up. And I wound up having to go all the way down that rabbit hole in order to try and get a picture in my head as to what was going to happen on a day-to-day basis so I could connect policy moves with market moves. And the two of them are they some days they lead each other. The policy leads the markets, and other days the markets are setting up to change the policy. And it's fascinating to watch. But once you have the framework in your head, the world makes so much more sense. And even then, there's still things you don't see, right? You're going to miss a tremendous amount of this because so much of the money flow you can't see. And that's why I found Mike Benz's work just unbelievably fascinating, because he was starting to tell us where the money was going. And then what happens? We unleash Elon Musk on the Office of Personnel Management, where all the checks are cut. We shut down USAID. Like, all of this is happening all at once. Tomorrow, it's going to be the National Endowment for Democracy. Okay? And then we find out that downstream of all of those, we find out all of these other organizations that are out there, where all of these people that we see on TV all the time and on our Twitter feeds, scolding Trump for being a terrible person, like Bill Kristol, and they're living fat and happy on multi-million-dollar salaries to sit around and destroy the world. And you're like, oh, but now everybody, but now everybody's been empowered to become a forensic accountant. All of a sudden, Mike's taught us how to do it, Mike among other people, and now everybody's doing it. And then all of their lies are debunked literally in real time. And the old rules of the game don't apply anymore, where they can stand up there, grandstand, and then have the media repeat lies over and over and over again. We're in a different world. It's a different game than we were in literally 2 months ago, and it's fascinating to watch. And it's really edifying, because if it is allowed to continue, and I believe it's going to be. This is important. They understand what I can see from Trump's team. They know what they need to do, and they are hitting hard across every vector to keep everybody off, to keep their enemies off balance. This is a blitzkrieg that by the time it's all done, they're going to get 90% of what they wanted done. And then all we have to do after that is some cleanup, and they'll all be running for the hills. And then, it blows all of this stuff wide open.
Yes. And in my simple way of thinking about it is this: every government will be changed, especially in Europe. European Union will no longer exist. NATO will no longer exist, or it will be a different form of organization. I don't know, but there is no coincidence. And I'm so glad we are talking about this, Tom. I really am. I mean it sincerely. There's no coincidence that Trump was asked about tariffs on European Union. He mentioned European Union, and he is, like you're saying, using Musk, or let's say designating Musk, to go after certain governments one by one, Chinese domino. And Putin just said in a recent interview that it was in the car, it's recorded, I'm attached the link down below. He said exactly how I feel, Tom. He said exactly how I feel. I knew for the longest time, in my sense, they were talking one to another, Trump and Putin, behind the scenes. No one knew, but they did. Putin says, eventually, Europe will bow down to Donald Trump, and he will reorder Europeans' relations. Because that's what's going to happen. Because if Trump comes to agreement officially with Putin, none of those so-called leaders in Europe can act the way they have been acting. They have to stop. It will be, it's just no backbone, disgraceful, doesn't matter. It's like, just go, everyone, just go. Now, the question is,
sure,
how this Europe, in your opinion, will look like? Is he going to impose those tariffs first in order to, destroy European Union completely because it's already crumbling from within? Or how this concept of EU will end, in your opinion? Now, one government by one government, or how?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, and you're going way towards the end of and I love where you're going with it, Anya. I really do, because I agree with you that that's the eventual goal here. Let's start from the beginning. This will end. So Trump and Putin, I firmly believe that they've been talking through intermediaries for months. Okay. Europe has the key here is, as always, it's about trade flows. Where the fulcrum lies, where where you can apply real leverage is in trade flows. Europe runs a massive trade surplus with the United States because of tariffs that were put in place during the Marshall Plan in the 1940s, 1950s. Howard Lutnick has made this point multiple times. I agree with him. When you look at the history of the United States relative to Europe, we have three main periods of trade deficits versus trade surpluses. up until what we call the Civil War in the 1860s, we ran a trade deficit with Europe, and then Europe was effectively in control of both our monetary policy, our trade policy, and eventually our internal and domestic policy. Lincoln was supposed to lose the war. He didn't. He didn't lose the war because Tsar Nicholas II backed him. Right? This is not to say that the South didn't have grievances. They did. It was a very complicated situation. Same thing with Ukraine and Russia. But it was also manufactured. Now, in that period after that, up until the end of World War II, we ran a trade surplus with Europe. Money was flowing into the United States. The great United States that we all think of today was built in that period between 1875 and 1945. And then from that point forward, we've been running a persistent trade deficit, which first the French blew open the doors of with Bretton Woods by demanding trade settlement in gold, which eventually forced Nixon to close the gold window in 1971. And then we got the Plaza Accord in 85, which created the City of London, and LIBOR was actually in control of our monetary policy at that point. And the dollar reserve standard was created. But it created a euro dollar market, an offshore dollar market that was an order of magnitude or two bigger than the domestic U.S. dollar market. And we ran persistent trade deficits in order to fund that rebuilding of the world. Trump wants the way you break the European. So the whole European Union project is based on this persistent trade deficit. The whole idea that any country in Europe could run their budgets at a lower capital risk, meaning bond yield, relative to the U.S., is only based on the fact that the U.S. was sending dollars into their system to undergird their central banks and their economies. We pull that money out. We reverse the trade flows. We reverse the dollar flows. And now all of a sudden, what does their credit risk look like? Really? You think that the Germans should be trading at 2% lower than a German 10-year Bund should be trading at 2% lower than an American 10-year Treasury? Really? You think that? Okay, that's nice. No. Everything Trump is doing is going to gut the German economy at a credit level. It's going to dry up dollars and money into Germany, such that the German Bund should be trading at 8% if the U.S. 10-year is trading at 4%. And how do you do that? Well, you put on tariffs, then you lower domestic taxes, then you lower domestic regulation, and then you lower the corporate income tax domestically and say, hey, everybody, why don't you come to the United States, build your, refine your chemicals here, build your cars here and everything else, and we'll give you our corporate tax rate. Drain Europe immediately. The European Union stops float. The whole idea that the European Union as a thing collapses, because if you look at what's happening in the European Union right now, they've gotten political control because they've had this money backstop. They've had this massive, quote unquote, Fed put or U.S. Treasury and U.S. budget deficit put underneath their political system, which has allowed them to use all this money to get to consolidate power in Brussels. Now, what are they going for? Monetary integration. They want to collapse the member central banks, fold them into the ECB, and then issue a digital euro. And they're still going forward with that plan.
Exactly. This is exactly the next step, digital euro.
But it's not going. But if it does happen, and they think they're going to go along with that little item on their Gantt chart over at Evil Corp Central, which is the way I like to put it. They got a big Gantt chart up there, big Microsoft project file of, well, on this date we do this, and this is when we're going to do this, and this is when we're going to do that, and then we do the digital euro. If they still think they're going to do that, Christine Lagarde, Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and all the rest of them, got news for you, folks. You're going to do that, and you're going to destroy what's left of Europe. So what's their plan? So what if they still think they're going to pull that off, as everything I've laid out already? What's their next move to Trump? clearly to start knocking planes out of the sky, clearly to blow up pipelines, clearly to cause train derailments, clearly to blow up food silos and everything else, clearly to start a civil war within the United States. Again, go watch the stupid fucking Obama movie. Pardon my French. I know I was trying to be nice.
This
Go
movie.
watch that freaking movie again. It's absolutely tells you everything they're gonna do. And guess what? They're already starting to do it. And from what I heard, after Trump walked into Davos 2025 and basically with 2 bags of poop, one, he lit on fire and threw on the stage at everybody there. And he reserved a second one specifically for Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, and threw it at him and said, you can stop debanking conservatives tomorrow. Because you work for me. You don't work for these people. Notice how Jamie Dimon wasn't up on that stage. Notice how John Solomon from Goldman Sachs wasn't on that stage. But Moynihan from BOFA, he was there. I bet you the CEO of Bank of New York Mellon was in the audience. I'm serious when I say all these things. There's a functional split at the top of the U.S. banking system. Just like there's a functional split happening at the top of City of London right now, which Trump is forcing, which Powell is forcing at the Federal Reserve. It's all a coordinated thing. Trump came out this morning and someone asked him, well, were you upset with the Fed that didn't lower interest rates the other day? He said, no, I think the pause was appropriate. Bingo. After the Fed held interest rates, he puts out this big tweet about the Fed, lambasting the Fed for all these policies. Notice how he didn't mention Chairman Powell once. He didn't. I noticed it. I'm like, well, maybe he's just being Trump. Maybe he really doesn't like Powell. I'm like, yeah, right. He knows Powell got him elected. And then 5 days later, he's asked, about this. He's like, no, the pause was appropriate for right now. He wants to get when he says he wants to get interest rates down, it's not that he's yelling at the Fed to cut interest rates, which is what the offshore dollar markets want. What he's saying is we need to get the cost of doing business down such that there's no risk in investing in America. That will naturally bring the cost of money down by lowering labor costs, by lowering regulatory costs, by lowering taxes, by balancing the budget, and by creating a positive inflow of capital into the U.S. where it can be protected and to not only rebuild the United States, but to help rebuild the global economy. And who loses in that scenario? The old oligarchs of Europe who are fighting him and who have lived off of our largesse for the last 70 years. I'm serious when I say this, folks. The implementation of the Secure Overnight Finance Rate, which was banging my on the table like Khrushchev about for 3 years, was the final Declaration of Independence by the United States, but it was at a financial level. We had never had financial control over our own country. 250 years, we didn't have financial control over our own country because of this issue of trade flows, central banks, and the ability for those things and currency arbitrage to use that against us and to buy off disloyal factions within our own country. And we're not unique to this. They do it everywhere. The British were the first ones to truly figure out how this works. It's why they created the Bank of England in the first place. And that's what fueled their maritime empire. It's what fueled their colonial empire. The French did it too in northern and the Sahel region of Africa and other where they had they've all been doing it. And now we're saying that's enough. You're not doing it to us anymore. You want to do that? Do it to other people. But we're done. And we know you don't have any money that we don't allow you to keep because we're taking it all. Because the hell with you diddle children. And I really do think that that's exactly why Trump is doing what he's doing. He's like, this has got to end. The trafficking of children, the drugs, the prostitution, the destroying of local culture, all of it all needs to end. And we need to get back to a relatively, I think the guy wants to end the income tax and go back to a gold-backed domestic dollar. That's what
I wanted to ask you. Exactly. And I think he mentioned this several times as he was referring to the history, because in that time, there was no income tax. That president, I forgot the name, who it was, you remember for sure, who was using the tariffs that much. During that time, there was no income tax.
Yeah.
So now
McKinley was it was McKinley, but Trump keeps invoking him for a reason.
Thank you. So, right, and he mentioned about the no income tax. Now, I want to ask you, to those people who are now saying that this is all, and I am totally on the same wavelength with you, as what you're saying is just absolutely, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Actually, it presents another angle that I didn't consider before, but now I'm totally like seeing the big picture from your side. I want to ask you, those people who think that Trump is trying to destroy BRICS, or that they will be suffering so much now because the prices will go up of the products, of at the gas station. What would you say to those people?
At the end of the day, these are first. They are a negotiating tactic. The goal here is to get the general tariff rate down, not up. When you realize, when everybody in the audience who thinks, and I'm reading the comments, by the way, everybody in the audience who thinks I'm crazy, I want you to go and look at the tariff schedule for Canada versus the US, for Germany versus the US, for France versus the US, for the EU versus the US. I want you to go look at those, and then you tell me that putting a 10% tariff on the European Union is such a terrible thing. Okay? Because they still have a 100% tariff on cars. 100%. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think Ford friends should let friends buy Fords for a variety of reasons, but it's not because Ford is a terrible company. It's because Ford doesn't have the ability to be a good company because it doesn't have access. It doesn't have full access to proper markets because of the massive tariff structure that's in place. Same thing with US Steel. Same thing with Stellantis. Same things. And to be honest with you, friends won't let friends buy BMWs anymore because the tariff now is so bad for German innovation that, dude, I've cross-shopped BMWs and Mercedes. I wouldn't buy one. I'm having a hard time even buying a Toyota at this point because I know full well, having talked to engineers at Toyota, that the culture of extreme quality at Toyota is gone because the profit motive isn't there anymore, because there's no way to make money under the current regulatory and tariff burden that everybody is facing. The goal here is to get rid of all of that. And you do that by first forcing all of this into the open and forcing people into negotiations. And Trump is the master of Zopa. I'm going to ask for the freaking moon. What I really want is, is a neighborhood outside of Greenville, South Carolina. And oh, look, I wound up getting all of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. I wasn't even looking for that. That's the mindset. And you have to realize that that's the way he operates. And if you take him at face value, you're doing it wrong. Take the totality of everything of all of the policies, of what he's doing, of the current dynamics of the world. Look at the big picture, and then start understanding that all of these things that he's talking are just tactics. There's a strategy, and you understand that strategy is different than tactics. Tariffs are a tactic. They're not a strategy. They're not the end of the strategy. They're the beginning of the strategy. So, like that's the way it works. And if you can't see it that way, well, I'm sorry, then you're going to like lambaste me in the comments. And 6 months from now, you'll come back and and then you'll go, damn it, Tom was right. Because I'm not saying I'm always right, because I'm not. But if you understand, you have to constantly update your map of how you think the world operates, which I do on a daily basis, in order to try and figure out what's coming next. Because we all have imperfect information. We all have our imprinting. We all have our biases and everything else. To the commenter who said that Tom doesn't think the world started before the formation of the United States, wrong. I think this whole thing started with the Bank of this period of history started with the formation of the Bank of England in 1694. Last I checked, the United States didn't exist in 1694. Okay? I think all the internecine European wars, like the Napoleonic Wars and everything else, all driven by central banking. Okay, and we can go earlier than that.
Yeah.
And then there are other conflicts in the world that have been stoked, a la the Middle East, a la Eastern Europe, a la that are thousands of years old, that are used as fulcra on which to poke old rivalry, ethnic rivalries by the very people whose superpower, by the way, again, the British. And this predates the Jews infiltrating Britain, by the way. Like, forget it. It's like being a shitbag is not. It is nobody's ethnic monopoly. Everybody does it. Everyone, Americans, Russians, Jews, Brits, French, everyone. And this
no perfect nation. Yeah, no perfect nation.
No, it's just like at the end of the day, they're just narcissistic abusers. That's a generic human trait. Some people are just really good at like building an entire like society around it, and we all do it, and we all build systems that allow these people to take control of our politics. And the goal, of course, as always, is to make the government smaller so that you can't express that maximally within a particular society. That's really important. That's a really important thing. Like, we're all guilty here. The United States has unbelievable numbers of sins that we have to expiate ourselves over. But let's start by not making things worse, and then figuring out how to just make things better. If we're all going to live in the past, well, ultimately, and I mean everywhere, if we're all going to live in the past, then we have no future. Acknowledge the past, acknowledge what you did wrong, fix it, and move on, and ask for forgiveness.
Thank you, Tom. And I think it's good that you stimulate with your opinions, because when someone is stimulated, I have this saying that, and this is my spiritual approach, the light workers can hear you or trigger you. So it depends on the case. But I want to go to something that is not it's not difficult to really have an opinion about. Let's talk about this schmuck for a moment. Because this schmuck can you just tell me in a second what you think, schmuck, what's gonna happen with this schmuck in a second? The face. Zelensky said, when it is said that Ukraine received $200 billion to support dollars, of course, to support the army during the war, that is not true. I don't know where all the money went. Perhaps it's true on paper with hundreds of different programs, I won't argue, and we are immensely grateful for everything. But in reality, we have received about $76 billion. It is significant aid, but it is not $200 billion. There are also many other humanitarian programs I am uninformed about, except for knowing of their existence. Perhaps the US President's administration will audit these programs and find additional billions, but I don't know where those funds went. I'm laughing because, how could you not laugh? Right. That's what the schmuck said, and also what J.D. Vance said during the interview with Maria. I always have trouble remembering her name. Bartolomeo. Yes. US spending, that's what J.D. Vance said. In 2019, the government spent $4.4 trillion. In 2024, the government spent $6.5 trillion. So, Tom, since we are on the topic of money, what do you think about schmuck's statements, and what do you think about the spending?
Okay, so two things. Yes, Zelensky is a schmuck. I want to say directly that the 2019 and 2024 numbers, I wrote that privately for my subscribers multiple times, and talked about it in podcasts multiple times. Does JD Vance listening to these podcasts, or somebody on the staff is, because it's kind of crazy when I stop to really hear that, because literally those numbers, right? Those dates, thank you, JD. I appreciate that. If you're listening, excellent. But when I see my work reflected back at me from the most unlikely of places, I literally like, really? Like me? Come on, give me a break. But they should know this stuff. So what's interesting about what Zelensky says is the following, and I'm going to throw something out here that came out of my morning discussion with Dexter White, which is, here's a schizo post for you. What if Zelensky doesn't even know how badly he's been screwed? What if he was told? What if we pledged all this money, but the money never showed up, and then we find out that $100 billion went to the Democrats to destroy our own country and to fight and to foment and extend a war where both the Ukrainians and the Russians were played for saps? Wouldn't that be the most unbelievable thing if we could figure that out, if we could find that out, which, by the way, is my base case. But if we can actually prove that with the receipts, the Democrats will never win an election in America for the next 40 years. Okay? Now, because it will be monstrous. And it also would create the framework by which Zelensky and Putin could sit down and actually work something out. It's clear that the money never got there. It's clear that the European Union has spent as much, if not more money, and yet the money never got to Ukraine. So where did the money go? What was it used for? Okay? Was it used? That we should be asking ourselves that. So
where did it go, Tom? What do you think? Where did it
go?
go?
I don't know, but I would say that it went, but you know where it went. It went to
Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard.
I mean, did it go to Obama? Did Obama get some? Sure. Did Bill Kristol get some? Did this one get done? Did it go all around the world to create a milieu within the United States for there to be a permanent coup against the American people? Yes. Because like it or not, folks in the audience who are anti-American, and you have every right to be, we still fund the whole of this architecture, whether we know it or not. And we as Americans voted to get to the bottom of all of this. And if we wind up having to throw a few babies out with all the bathwater in the process, meaning some good things that we do relative versus all the bad, well, that's going to be the nature of things. And we'll figure that out later, and we'll fix it later, and we'll fix that later on. But for right now, the rot is so deep, and I'm telling you, they know exactly where to go. They are going to the heart of the problem. USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, these are all the NGOs. He's moved USAID under the State Department. Here's one for you. You would be shocked, as I was, to find out just how many organizations within the American government were creations of Congress that are not under control of the president. Things that you would think are cabinet level positions or sub departments of existing cabinet positions. I'll give you two. Ready? The SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, and the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Committee. Guess what? Neither of them under Treasury or Commerce. Who controls them? They control themselves. They were created by an act of Congress. They exist they exist on their own. Okay? And there's dozens of them, and you know their names. You would be shocked if you went through all of this to go, are you kidding? I'll be honest with you. I assumed, for example, that SEC was somewhere under, the Treasury Department or the Commerce Department or something. Nope. It's its own thing. That's why they can empower their own administrative courts to enable to then go after people for violations of their rules, create star chamber courts and administrative courts that they then issue judgments against people. So much of the evil that we see corporations engage in that we don't like, or this person we don't like, or whatever, it's all done through these extra constitutional organizations within the government funded by tax money to create a political to push a political agenda and give you give us the scapegoat to be angry at, as opposed to the system itself to protect the real quote unquote deep state. So the goal here is ultimately to free us of these administrative and regulatory bodies that circumscribe our lives with multiple layers of taxation, multiple layers of regulation. And it starts here and now at the national level with tariffs and all the rest of it. Understand, just this morning, Denmark has agreed to allow more U.S. troops to be stationed in Greenland. Mark Rutte, the now General Secretary of NATO, bent the knee to Trump and said, yeah, if you want Greenland, we can't stop you. What's NATO going to do? Is NATO going to go to war with the United States over this? What's Denmark going to do? With what army? The French army? And that's an interesting legal conundrum, since Greenland isn't a part of the EU. It's a protectorate of an EU country, specifically not a part of the EU. So there's all this stuff. And you start when you start digging under the hood of all these things that we just assume exist. And you come to find out that they don't. It's all nonsense. Like, the one screeching the worst this morning about all of this is Elizabeth Warren. Because Elizabeth Warren has been using the consumer...
Pocahontas, right? Pocahontas?
The senator. Yeah, Pocahontas. The consumer... the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that one. That's her private army of auditors and HR nannies and the rest of it. She runs that thing like a personal fiefdom, and she's used that against the crypto industry, against people she doesn't like, in the banking industry and everything else. She's used that egregiously, and she knows that that's on the chopping block. She knows it.
That's why she's so aggravated, Tom, during those hearings. I was watching very closely. She's really one of those most aggravated. Yes. Yeah.
Histrionic over vaccines? No, she works for pharma. And she works for all the... It's just ridiculous.
So I have my last question for you, because I don't want to keep you too much longer. I really appreciate this conversation. I know you do. I really appreciate. So, Tom, if someone will ask you, as someone like myself who I've lived in United States, I've been there now. I returned about a week ago after 3 years of absence. Emotional trip for me, I have to say. It was my home for a long time, and I see it. I see it different now since Trump's took over the president office. I do. Some people might not like what I say. I actually see hope for America, and I see the future. I think, my opinion is, ultimately Putin and Trump are fighting with the same evil forces. And I want to ask you, do you see how the lifestyle in US will look like overall, as far as affording a home, being able to work, safety? I will just put it in one category, kind of normal, decent life. Do you see this coming to US back and being established to that point that people can actually, I don't want to use this word American dream, because it's not my favorite phrase, but just a decent life of a citizen. Do you see that coming to the US?
I think it's on the table. We're in the way I was putting it to my patrons yesterday, and I do a bi-weekly report, so I do 2 a week for them on Wednesdays and Sundays. We're in movie terms, we're at the inciting incident or just past it, meaning we're at the first part of this, where the bad thing that happened that sets the plot in motion. In technical, in story structure terms, that's called the inciting incident, that which starts the process. Leia stealing the plans for the rebels stealing the plans of the Death Star, right? The inciting incident in Star Wars happens before the movie even opens, for example. The Terminator going back in time, right? Okay, that's the inciting incident. We're just past that. Okay, we're at that moment where a naked Arnold Schwarzenegger walks up to Bill Paxton and says, "Give me your clothes, please. Laundry day. Nothing to wear." And then he kills them all and takes their clothes and moves on, right? We're at that point, the shock and awe moment of what's going on. There's a whole lot left. But the American people, at least a significant number of them, understand where the problem is now. They've been unleashed to be able to say, we don't want the world that we've been given, and we do not want the country we've been shamed into believing is the best we can achieve for ourselves. And I want everyone to understand that that's what we want for everyone else. We all live under these oppressive, obnoxious, horrific governments. I talk to my friends in the UK, and they're like, it's awful. I'm like, well, if you need to, come here and we'll take care of you for a little while until that collapses, and then you can go home. My family, remember, Anya, I am a second-generation Italian immigrant. My grandparents all came over here 110 years ago, 115 years ago to get away from, what was happening in Italy.
Mussolini time.
Yeah. And, just before Mussolini, actually, but during the rise of Mussolini, they left early. They all left in the aughts, like 06, 07, 08, 010, the 10, 11, that era, right? Pre-World War I, they all came here. And so America fundamentally, all the various ethnic groups of America came here as a reaction against the oppression they had at home. The original English settlers, the French, the Italians, the Irish, every wave, right? So it's embedded deeply in who we are as people. And, we're not above a fight for that. So we have a system of governance which sticks in the craw of the old kings and queens of Europe, because it proves that if we're successful, it proves that sovereign people should enshrine sub-sovereign governments as opposed to sovereign governments controlling sub-sovereign people. The current way the U.S. government operates is far outside that constitutional mandate. The spirit, the letter, everything of that law, of the Constitution, without a doubt. But that founding document and those founding ideas, they need to be destroyed. If you're thinking like an old European oligarch, to prove to the world that humanity are just tax cattle and should be thankful that they have philosopher kings running the world for them and managing everything for them so that they don't have to. Bullshit. We're not going to go down without a fight. And if we survive the fight that's coming, we'll break it all open and help liberate everybody else. I want to leave you with a thing that I invoke all the time. During the Vietnam War, the Chinese foreign minister was asked during an interview. I don't remember his name. I think it was during the Vietnam War. He was asked by interviewer, he's like, well, what do you think of the French Revolution? And he said, well, I think it's too early to tell. It's 200 years after the French Revolution. He said, I think it's too early to tell. Well, I want you to think about the American Revolution the same way. Has the American Revolution, did we win? No, we didn't. With everything I've kind of laid out for you in this whirlwind of American history via trade flows and economic circumstance is based on that is based around that observation. You can declare independence, you can even fight a war for independence, but if the people who you fought that war against don't accept the outcome, then you have to keep fighting until you finally gain monetary and financial independence. And so You can get political independence, but you can't. But political independence is downstream of the money. If there's anything that we've been taught over the last 50 or 60 years, it is that. And we finally have an information distribution system, as just decentralized as it is, to make that point in smaller and smaller and smaller venues, and in both smaller venues and larger venues on a regular basis. That's why podcasts like this are so damn important. That's why when people ask me to come on their show, I don't care how quote unquote big, or like, dude, let's just hit record. Let's do the thing. Why? Because it's so very important that you go in and you talk to as many people as possible. Okay. It's so important. And you leave all your preconceptions at the door, start from scratch, rebuild. Here's my perspective on the world. Let's apply that to the world you live in, because there's probably a similar story there, but with a Polish flavor or Hungarian flavor or an Israeli flavor or an Iranian flavor or an Afghani flavor or whatever flavor. Right?
Tom,
right?
You know what you made me realize. I really thank you so much for saying this. I realized something, and this is huge. My question was very much in the way how I asked that question. Now I realize was very much self-gratification question. And I think what you just said is about what if not this generation, or maybe even the next one to come, those in hundreds or 200 years, you said, from now, will look back, and maybe they will be the ones who are living like the benefits of all of it, but they wouldn't be there if not the people who are living now. And I think this is the problem with societies mostly, because especially lately, people just want everything like this. And they don't want to sacrifice anything at all, ever.
It's funny, Anya, when I had lunch with my daughter yesterday, and she's a little worried about where things are going, blah, 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 blah. And fine, she's 18. She's not fully formed. And even my daughter has been infected with a little bit of this crazed mind virus. And I said to her, look, I know this is scary. I know you have a lot in your head because you've listened to me for all these years, and now you're dealing with all this other stuff outside of this. I said, you have only lived under this type of environment. You're only conscious during the worst period of like societal insanity in 100 years. And to you, this is normal. What I'm here to tell you is that it's not. Now, I don't know what is coming in the future, but I know that what we have today has to be torn down, normality reassessed, and then your generations are going to decide what new system is going to come about. So the vestiges of the old system that still influence the current system, we have to get rid of that and tear this one down about half to 2/3 of the way. And then you guys will figure out what we're going to build after that. That's the big story. Humanity tells this story over and over again. They tell it in the Bible. We tell it in every friggin' bad version of it, in every movie we ever built. All the creation myths, all of human history is trying to tell the same thing. The old institutions do not serve the people anymore to create stability, and they become blind and sclerotic and incapable of serving the people. They have to fail and be rebuilt, and they will be rebuilt on the ashes of the old. And what was good about the old, they'll dispense with the bad, take what was good, use that as a building block for the next one. I don't know what that's going to look like. I probably won't live that long to even see the beginnings of it. I don't know, but that's what we're here for. But right here, right now, you absolutely have to tear, Mr. Trump, tear this shitting system down. Period. Because it's not serving anybody except the very, very, very worst of humanity. And they don't deserve anything. They deserve to have their wealth stripped from them, all of the imprimatur of them being decent people stripped of them, march naked through the streets, their wealth stripped to use to rebuild what they have absolutely destroyed. That's what needs to be done. That is our mission. That is our goal. We can do it We can do it peacefully. We can do it violently. It's their choice. I hope it's peacefully.
Tom, thank you. Thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate your time and for this conversation. I was trying not to read the chat because at the end of the day, I know what I think, I know what my guest thinks, and I appreciate that. Lots of respect, and thank you. I see you, I don't know when, but I think soon, so we can catch up on, it will be, again, lots of new things. I mean, probably now when we disconnect, I will go to the news and I will see like 50 new things happening already at the same time.
I know. It's an amazing time to be living in. It really is. And we'll see what comes next. Thank you, Anya. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. See you next time. Bye-bye.